I'm 32 now, but this happened when I had just turned 27. At the time, I worked as a mechanic in a small town inland, the type with a single main road and a gas station that everyone uses. I've always been a quiet guy, the kind who prefers early mornings, coffee in a thermos, and a bit of peace before the day fills with noise. Fishing was my escape, not in a dramatic sense, but simply a habit I'd carried since childhood, a way to shut everything off for a few hours. There was a reservoir about 40 minutes from where I lived. Nothing special about it. Murky water, some scattered trees, half-broken pier, and usually a couple of older men sitting around telling the same stories over and over. But on weekdays, especially early in the morning, it was empty, completely empty. The incident happened on a Wednesday in late September, the first cold morning after a long stretch of heat. It had rained the night before, leaving everything damp and smelling like wet soil. I drove out before sunrise, planning to fish for a couple of hours before heading to work. I remember feeling unusually relaxed that morning. I even took the long route so I could watch the fog lift off the fields. I had no reason to think anything was wrong, no sense of dread, no strange dream the night before, nothing to hint that I was about to meet someone or something that would stick with me for years. Just a quiet morning, a normal morning, until it wasn't. I got to the reservoir around 5:40 a.m. The sky was still dark, but a soft bluish tint was starting to spread across the water. The air was crisp enough to make my fingers sting a little when I unloaded my gear. I remember noticing the smell of wet vegetation, strong enough to almost taste. I set up near the older pier, the one full of nail heads that stick up just enough to catch your foot if you're not careful. My routine was always the same. Cast once, take a sip of coffee, sit, breathe, and let my mind wander. It was rhythmic, grounding, familiar. My phone had barely any signal out there, and that was part of the appeal. I put it on Do Not Disturb anyway, and placed it next to the tackle box. The only sounds were distant birds and the occasional drip of water from the dock. Around 6:20, the sun finally started peeking through the mist. The light spread slowly across the reservoir, revealing small ripples on the surface. I hadn't caught anything, but I wasn't there for the fish as much as I was for the solitude. I remember thinking about work, a busted transmission I had to look at later, a customer who was angry over something he caused himself, normal annoyances, life stuff, nothing unusual, nothing even mildly strange. I finished my coffee and tossed the thermos into the passenger seat of my car so I wouldn't forget it when I left. When I came back to the pier, I noticed how still the water had suddenly become, almost unnaturally smooth. At the time, I shrugged it off. Nature is weird sometimes. But looking back now, that was the last truly normal moment of the day. I was reeling in my line to cast again when I caught movement on the opposite shore. At first I thought it was just a deer or maybe a stray dog, things I'd seen out there plenty of times, but when I squinted, I realized it was a person, a man. He was standing perfectly still near a cluster of trees, almost blending into them. The fog was thicker on that side of the reservoir, so I couldn't make out much detail, but I saw enough to know he was tall, taller than average, and wearing some kind of dark jacket. He wasn't walking, not moving at all, just facing the water. I assumed he was another fisherman, maybe someone who liked the solitude as much as I did, but something felt off. Normally, people wave or nod when they see someone across the reservoir, just a polite acknowledgement. This guy didn't do that. I told myself maybe he didn't see me. The fog could distort distance. Maybe he was looking somewhere else. Still, every couple of minutes when I'd cast or shift on the pier, I'd glance back over. He hadn't changed positions, same stance, same direction, like a statue. But what really got under my skin was that I couldn't see his face. Even as the sun rose and visibility improved, the shadows around him seemed to cling in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't supernatural or anything dramatic. It just looked wrong, like his head was tilted slightly down, obscuring everything. The rational part of me said he was probably just a guy out there early, maybe lost in thought. The reservoir attracted people like that, but something in my chest tightened anyway, a small, instinctive discomfort I couldn't explain. I tried to shake it off. I kept fishing, but I checked on him more often than I'd like to admit. Around 7:10 a.m., I realized I hadn't seen the man move once. Not a step, not a shift of weight, not even a raise of the shoulders, like someone taking a breath. I cast a line and pretended not to care, but the hairs on my arms were standing straight up, and my hands felt colder than the morning air should have made them. I thought about calling out, something casual like, "Morning?" But the idea of hearing nothing back suddenly felt unbearable, or worse, hearing a reply. I decided to pack up early. Not because I was scared, I told myself, but because I had work to do. It was a lie. My chest felt tight, and a heaviness had settled in my stomach. When I bent down to grab my tackle box, my foot slipped slightly on the damp pier. I looked down to regain balance, and when I looked up again, the man was gone. Not walking away, not moving into the trees. Just gone. There was nowhere obvious he could have gone without me seeing. The reservoir edge on that side was open and sparse. If he'd turned away, I should have seen the motion. But the spot where he'd been standing was empty. I stared at the opposite shore so long, my eyes began to water from not blinking. Nothing, no figure, no footsteps, no movement in the brush. Just silence. That kind of silence that thickens the air until even small sounds feel wrong. Enough, I muttered to myself, trying to sound annoyed instead of unsettled. I grabbed my rods, my box, my bag. I felt exposed, standing on that pier, like something was watching me, even though I knew that was irrational. I walked back toward my car faster than I should have. Much faster. My car was parked on a small dirt patch off the trail, maybe 30 yards from the pier. I kept my eyes down mostly, focusing on my footsteps so I wouldn't slip on the wet ground. When I reached the car and popped the trunk, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I put my gear inside and slammed it shut harder than necessary. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not behind me on the trail, not in the brush, but directly to my right. Slow, heavy, like someone walking through shallow mud. My head snapped toward the sound, and the man from the opposite shore was standing about 15 feet away. Closer than anyone should have been able to get without making more noise. He was taller up close, maybe 6'4". His jacket was dirty, like he'd slept in the woods. His jeans were soaked from the knees down. His face, I still struggle to describe it. Not because it was deformed or monstrous, but because his expression was so blank it felt wrong. His eyes were open too wide, unblinking, unfocused, yet somehow staring straight at me. "Morning," I said automatically, my voice cracked and thin. No response, not even a twitch. "Didn't mean to bother you." Nothing. He took one slow step toward me, then another. I fumbled for the car door handle without taking my eyes off him. My keys trembled in my hand, refusing to cooperate. "Do you need something?" I asked, breathless, still silent, still staring. Then abruptly, he tilted his head, a sharp, unnatural angle, like a puppet pulled by the wrong string, and took a deep breath through his nose, loud enough for me to hear. That sound broke me. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside and slammed it shut, just as he stepped close enough that his jacket brushed the side mirror. I locked the doors and didn't look away from him as I started the engine. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the keys twice. The man stood there, inches from my window, staring without blinking. His chest rose and fell too slowly, like each breath was deliberate. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I reversed so fast the tires spun in the mud. When I shifted into drive, he finally moved, taking a single step toward the car as if he were about to follow. I didn't give him the chance. I sped out of the lot, heart pounding in my throat, eyes locked on the rearview mirror until the reservoir disappeared behind me. I reported it later that day. The police said they'd take a look, but I never heard back. A deputy told me off record that homeless squatters sometimes live in the woods out there, but that doesn't explain how he crossed the reservoir, or how quietly he moved, or the way he stared at me like he already knew me. It's been 5 years. I haven't gone fishing since. Not alone, not with friends, not at all. Sometimes early in the morning when I'm half awake and the house is still dark, I swear I hear that same slow, wet footstep outside my window. Just once. Never repeated. And every time, the smell of damp earth fills my room. I try to tell myself it's nothing, a dream, a trick of memory, but I can't shake the feeling that he wasn't just some random man, and that whatever he wanted, he didn't finish that morning.